Hey, welcome. This is Derek Killian. This is Built by Sports, the podcast built by fans who are built by sports. And this is our local Utah edition. And I'm joined by another local Utahn, Parker Killian.
And how's everyone doing?
And native Nebraskan, Ty Lau.
Hello.
All right. Today we're going to go over some Utah sports topics. We're obviously the biggest show in town is the Utah Jazz. We're going to discuss a little bit of Utah Jazz off season. We're going to go through what we think as fans. We're not pros, we're not GMs, but we're going to put our GM caps on and discuss a little bit about what we think should happen with our team since we're so invested in this team. And we're going to go over a couple other topics, favorite sports memories, a little bit of a peek into what's going on in the NBA. And we're just going to get started. So do you guys want to add anything before we get going on these topics?
I think
just
we're good to go.
Talk about some jazz.
All right. Jazz topics. Okay. So some things on my mind this week as we've been watching the NBA, the conference finals in both the East and the West. Over the last 3 seasons, ever since we've obtained Bogdanovic and Conley, the Jazz have gone on some regular season tears where they're just tearing it up. National media is talking about them, saying, oh, man, watch out for the Jazz. They might be legit this year, only to fizzle out in the playoffs. They seem to be predictable. They seem to be able to be picked apart. So as you guys are watching these conference finals, what do you guys think these other teams have that the Jazz need? And whether it's coaching, player personnel, let's just discuss that a little bit. Let's start in the West. Let's start with this series that just got wrapped up, the Mavericks and the Warriors.
Well, one thing that stood out to me, Derek, was definitely the Jazz, like you said earlier. In the regular season, we used our spacing, we used our three-point shooting. Defenses are a little bit more lax than a long 82-game season. And in the playoffs, defenses kind of they tighten up a little bit. And one thing that really hurt us as the Jazz is length. Our starting 5 is 6'1", 6'2", 6'4", 6'8", 7'1", and Rudy. But the Mavericks, who we faced up against, Luka Doncic, tall, Finney-Smith, tall. I mean, they were all tall. They're all stout. They're good defensive wings. So one thing that I think from watching these playoffs is these teams have defensive wings that are long, athletic, and can be able to defend tight. Especially we're talking about the West, but when you think about the East side, that's been a defensive dogfight. Like the scoring hasn't been super high in these playoffs. It's been, which team is going to outlast the other. It's been physical. It's been tough. And so getting, physicality is another thing that, has really stood out to me. There's not one person on the Jazz that I can think of, except for Eddie House right now, that really will just get in somebody's face and kind of guard up on them and kind of bully them. And that's something that the Jazz has missed for a while, is a guy that can just get in somebody's face, lock them down, and bully them down.
Yeah, I'm going to piggyback off of that. I think that the Jazz needs to find their drive again. This season, I think more so definitely than last season where we were top of the league, the Jazz need to find their dedication again. The Golden State Warriors have been to the finals 6 times in the last 8 years, and yet you see that they're just as hungry as they were the day one. They want it, and it's in a way where you can tell they're still just loving the moment and loving playing basketball, but they're hungry and they want to defeat the person standing across from them. They're going to probably go up against Boston, and they're just going to take it to them right away. They're going to, first of all, Draymond Green wants to take it to Marcus Smart. He thinks he's the best defender in the league. But then Curry wants to win that MVP and that Finals MVP. So they still have a lot to prove. And I feel like the Jazz this season weren't playing like they had anything to prove. They felt maybe like last year they were best in the league, so they have nothing left to prove. But I feel they need to find that next level, that next step mentally before they can have true success in the league.
So, Parker, where do you think that drive comes from? Do you think it comes from within the players, or do you think it has to be like a coaching mentality, or what do you think?
I guess it's yet to be seen. I feel like Coach Snyder does have a little bit of a relaxed coaching style where he's like, hey, we're gonna figure it out. Just keep playing. We're gonna figure it out. But sometimes you need a coach to light a fire under your butt, I remember a couple years ago, there was a game where the Jazz were playing like a bunch of bums, and Quinn Snyder grabbed his clipboard and slammed it on the ground. He's like, you figure it out. And he walked away and let the players discuss what they're going to do to straighten it out. They ended up making like a 15-point comeback and winning that game. Like, we need more fire from the coach, but also I just don't think Mike Conley has fire. He's the nicest guy in the league. And I don't think, even though he is a leader in some ways, he's not the leader that's going to inspire us to fight.
Yeah. No, one of the reasons I asked that was just, hearing that. I mean, it has to be a well-rounded thing, right? It can't just be it has to be the coach. It has to be the player. It has to be the GM, whatever. Everybody has to have a desire to win. And I just think back, when Donovan Mitchell was a rookie, right? We made it to the playoffs. We weren't supposed to win that first round, but we did. But you saw Quinn Snyder's passion during that first round too. Like, he had so much passion in this last playoff round against the Mavericks. Like, the Mavs would start going on a run, and Quinn Snyder would just be on the sideline just kind of talking to the coaches, but he wasn't like, I didn't see that yelling. And maybe it's because, he was injured as a coach. And, he had his little problems going on as well. But I just didn't see the drive either. I didn't see that passion from them that they, really wanted it and really wanted to win.
I think what Quinn has to prove at this point, and to be honest, I don't want to lose Quinn. Don't get me wrong. But sometimes coaching changes what the team needs. Rick Carlisle was an amazing coach for the Dallas Mavericks, but for some reason, with the new personnel that they had, they felt like they needed a coaching change. And a lot of people, because of his failure in the Milwaukee Bucks, thought Jason Kidd was a horrible hire. And kind of look how far he took him. Maybe he's the right guy for that personnel. And then another thing I was thinking about was the Celtics coach, Brad Stevens. He kind of proved himself in the ranks as he was up and coming, but when he came to the Celtics, they had a whole bunch of young draft picks, and he proved to be an amazing X's and O coach, but he never really proved that he could handle star egos or anything like that. So when Quinn Snyder first came to the Jazz, it was a young rebuild team. They had just fired Ty Corbin. They were rebuilding. They were gaining all these draft assets, and he had to manage all these egos. And we saw some things fall by the wayside that actually caused a lot of drama within the team. We saw the Enes Kanter stuff go on under his watch. We saw all these other things that were just drama, like high-profile people that are difficult to deal with. And then over the last 2 years, we've seen stuff go on with Rudy and Donovan, and I'm not convinced at this point that Quinn's the right coach to coach star mentalities and star players. I think he's one of the best X's and O's coaches in the game, but he still has to prove that. And maybe their remedy to that is to move off of one of Donovan or Rudy to try to alleviate that, but I'm not sure that's the best route to go. Just to add to that topic, I know I kind of got off topic a little bit, but what I'm seeing in these playoffs, it's kind of along the same lines that you guys are talking about, but I don't think we have the players to execute Quinn's defensive system. If we are to retain Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert, if Rudy Gobert is supposed to go cover the corner three, he's actually proven, because he holds people below their natural shooting percentage when he goes out to the perimeter. A lot of people say he can't guard the perimeter. He can, But in the back of his mind, he knows he can't take that extra step he needs to out to the 3-point line, because if they try to drive, he has to get back to the paint because nobody's covering his back behind him. Like you said, Ty, Bojan Bogdanovic, amazing offensive player, but he's 6'7", 6'8", but slow-footed. And they're just driving and scoring in the paint. We got eaten alive by the Mavs because they're an amazing passing team too, as soon as they pulled Rudy out. So we need the players. If we trade Mike Conley, trade a bunch of other guys, we need the players to execute that scheme. And that's what I've seen out of the Warriors series. When Steph Curry first came into the league, he was not seen as a good defensive player. Everybody tried to go after him and pick on him. And as I was watching this series, he's 100% bought in. And I saw a couple times where they set a couple screens in a row to get Luka on Curry, and he couldn't really take advantage of them. And I don't know what Curry has done in the off seasons, whether it's just work on his defensive footwork. He's obviously added muscle. You can see that he's added muscle, but he's probably top 3, top 5 offensive player in the league this year. But he's getting down in a defensive stance and getting dirty. And that's one thing we didn't see from Donovan either. So our stars need to take accountability and be able to get down in a defensive stance once the playoffs start and lock in.
Definitely.
No, I would agree with that. It's hard when, we judge Rudy when he can't guard the outside, but like you said, he hasn't had help from our players to guard on them. And like Parker was saying, that passion part, I think that might be a big part of it. Like, do they have that passion to play defense? And then just when you were talking, I started thinking about like what made us successful last season compared to this season as a team. Like, I know we lost in the second round last year, but one of the things was we were one of the best 3-point shooting teams in the league. We were, I think the average was like 17 3-point shots made per game last season. And that dropped down a little bit this year. And we still made our fair share in the regular season. But when the playoffs came, we were awful 3-point shooters. Donovan Mitchell, I think, was in the 20% range at 3-point percentage made. Mike Conley missed his last 12 3-point shot attempts within the last 2 games in a row. So what's the difference? Like, Joe Ingles was on the team and he was healthier and he was a little bit younger and he was playing a great 6th man of the year type of year. Clarkson was also he was the 6th man. He was playing really well and his percentages were up last year as well. Niang was on the team. They're not athletic. They're not great, but what's the difference? Like, is it just because we don't have those players this year and we couldn't shoot the 3 that's causing some of the rift and causing, because if you can't score, sometimes that's a mental game where your defense is going to lax if you can't score because you're like, crap, I can't score. And so you're just pouting and not doing well. So maybe that's part of it too, is it's just a mental game where they're not able to do that.
I think that is part of what I've seen in these Final Four teams in the playoffs still is they have players that can hit threes like the Mavericks did, and obviously Golden State, the Celtics do, and so do the Heat, except the Heat are struggling now because they're missing some of that help from Tyler Hero. But one thing that's kind of going around the league right now is the focus on drivability with players. That's how the Mavs made their jump this season. They traded Porzingis away and they got Dinwiddie in. And now they had 3 players with Doncic, Dinwiddie, and Brunson that could drive into the lane, cause chaos, and then you pass it out to your 3-point shooters who are going to have an easy shot. Or they're just experts at scoring, so you get that easy too as well. So I feel like that's something as well that the Jazz need to look into. We have Donovan, we have Clarkson. Mike Conley used to be able to drive, but he has dropped off. He is done with the drivability. So we need to find a solution for our drivability in the offseason, I think.
So to add to that, Parker, as far as Mike Conley, it was actually sad to see because he's been a good point guard for a long time. But I think teams know from the first year we obtained Conley, the Jazz are a finesse team. They shoot a lot of threes and whatnot. They pass the ball really well when they get their offense going. but they're a finesse team. You can get Rudy Gobert riled up by holding him, roughing him up. He sticks around a little too long at the other end of the floor arguing with the refs. You start to get in his head. Bogdanovic, even though he's not the most athletic, I think he's our biggest dog out there in the fight. He's like pumping his fists, but he can't always back that up with his athleticism, but he does have some fire to him. Mike Conley almost tried to hide. There was a couple times where he was even trying to bring the ball up the court, and they're pressing him full court or meeting him at half court, and he gives it away to guys like Royce O'Neal as if he doesn't want the ball in his hands. Like, okay, you bring the ball up. And you're a point guard. He couldn't fight through aggressive defenses. He couldn't fight through any of that, and he kind of just faded away into the shadows. Yeah, we need somebody. Donovan can do it. He's got a bigger upper body. He can take that contact and fight through pressure and whatnot. But Mike Conley, he might be good for another team if we move on from him. He might be able to help some young guys develop. But as getting into deep playoff runs that are aggressive and physical, it definitely shows with him. The one thing, if we can just cover it for 1 minute, we spent most of our time comparing to the Warriors and the Mavericks, but the Heat and Celtics, another thing that strikes me with those two teams right there is the just amount of athleticism. When we go from that series that we watched with the Jazz and Mavericks, our home Jazz team, and then we go watch a game like this, it's just everybody that's on the court is an athlete, and it's just even Royce O'Neal, who's typically our number one wing defensive player. It just makes him look slow. It's just so shocking to me when I see that. What are you guys seeing out there?
No, I would agree with you. Exact same thing is athleticism. Like I said at the very beginning, like they do have athletes, and like the Heat right now, they're dealing with a lot of injury. But like Parker was saying a little bit ago, like the Heat are kind of having a Jazz problem right now, where they're really kind of dependent on the 3-point shot. Not Jimmy Butler, he doesn't shoot the best 3-point percentage. He has a really good mid-range and drive game, but he is kind of being held hostage when his team's not shooting great from the three. And that's why their offense is kind of sputtering. And yeah, our hero is out right now. And they've had a couple of other injuries that have plagued their team through this final or conference finals. But I would agree with you, Derek. Like athleticism is what's keeping them in there and keeping them striving and playing hard. And that's just something, like you said, Royce O'Neal's our top defender. He's not the most athletic, and it makes a huge difference. Out of everybody on the Jazz, who would you say would be the most athletic? Like Donovan Mitchell for sure, but after Donovan and, Rudy's athletic in his own part, but like other wings, who would you put as the next?
I think Clarkson? Next. He's deceptively athletic because he's more shifty, you think, but the amount of contact he goes through and the speed he has, I think it's not really noticed in his game, but he's amazing sometimes with the athletic play that he does.
It's true.
I would agree as far as quickness goes. Clarkson's quick, but he's so willowy and thin. Guys like he does try, I think, on defense. He just doesn't have the tools he needs to hold up against guys like Luka Doncic. Or if they try to set a screen and he gets pinned down low, there's not much he can do. But he's not a high-level player, but we added him mid-season. But I think Daniel House, even when he would come on the court, sometimes only play 12 minutes a game, but it was noticeable. He would come out the court, and that level of athleticism was like, oh, wow, he's flying around the perimeter, and that's just something we have been without for a while.
And we'll probably talk about this in other episodes too, but if we get Eric Pascal back, Eric Pascal was not played enough by Quinn Snyder this season, in my opinion. And like Derek was saying with House, whenever Eric Pascal came in, he physically dominated the other team. And
I would say with him, I would say he's physically man-child. Like, holy cow, he's huge, right?
Yeah.
The thing that makes him super good is you can see the heart when he's on the court. Like, he wants to play hard. He wants to win. Would I say he's the most athletic? Probably not. Then that's my opinion. Maybe compared to us, he's a freak of nature athletic. But But like compared to like some of these other guys who are playing, like for the Celtics, like Williams, like not the most amazing person in the world, basketball wise, but he's playing hard and he's playing great because he's playing athletic and he's playing hard on defense and he's helping them and he'll score the 3-point shot when he needs to. And so that's where, like Derek, where you were saying it earlier, like I think that's probably the biggest thing for me for the Jazz this offseason is we need to get longer. We need to get more defensive minded wings out on the, to help Rudy out if we keep Rudy.
Okay. All right. So with all that, that takes us directly into our next topic, basically. So just the Jazz offseason. We brought in Danny Ainge midseason this last year. He's built this team that's most likely the series might get wrapped up tonight, the Heat and the Celtics, if the Celtics wrap it up tonight. If not, it's going to game 7. But he built that Celtics team and he built 2 different versions of a championship team while keeping it competitive in between rebuilds and whatnot. So we got Danny Ainge. But if you were able to be Danny Ainge or at least be in the room and give him your 2 cents on what the Jazz need to do, what would you do this offseason with the Jazz?
I'm going to let you guys go first because I have some things to say, and then I'll let you guys give your ideas first, and then I have some ideas that we can all discuss too.
Eric, let's hear yours first, man.
Okay. So there's a lot of discussion in Jazzland, the whole league, not the whole league. Okay, we'll start with Donovan Mitchell. If Donovan Mitchell was ever rumored to be available, the whole league would at least call to see if they have a shot at obtaining him. We got a really good asset right there. I bet you half the league is going to be calling this offseason to see what the price is for Gobert, if not more. We could get more for Donovan, but he's a younger player. He's 25 this year. Typically players like the Donovan Mitchell mold are going to be a high-level player till he's about 32, roughly. So, if he sticks around that long, but we don't have to worry about that. He signed an extension. We got him another 4 years, about the 4th year as a player option, where he can choose what he wants to do. But with Danny Ainge at the helm, I'd rather move some pieces to try to make a contender around him for these next 3 years or so. So my trade that I would do is I love Rudy Gobert. I think he brings us up. He brings our basement up, but he caps us out in the playoffs. I think if we could move assets around to add to this Jazz team, I would keep both. But the sad thing is that the Jazz don't have assets. They've traded away their first-round picks. They don't have any picks this offseason. They don't have a first, a second, nothing. And so I think Danny Ainge is good at fleecing people. I think he's going to search the whole league. He's going to find one team that thinks Rudy Gobert is their missing piece. He's going to get honestly, I think as a Jazz fan, we might see the initial trade and be really upset because I could see something coming back for Rudy Gobert where it's like a DeAndre Hunter from the Hawks. That's like he scores 14 points a game and he is a defensive lockdown wing, 6'8", like 7'2", 7'3" wingspan. And then maybe like a Gallinari on the side for the money reasons to make it work. But I could also see Danny Ainge fleece some of 3 to 4 picks on the side. And like at face value, Jazz fans might be like, well, okay, that's going to piss off Donovan. We're going to be a play-in team, if anything with that trade. But then I see Danny Ainge moving those picks on the peripherals to get more players like, the going rate, the rumors for the going rate for Jeremy Grant on the market this last year is they wanted 2 first-round picks. If we're able to obtain 2 first-round picks from the Hawks, then we trade those for Jeremy Grant. And now all of a sudden you got a starting lineup of, Donovan Mitchell, Royce O'Neal, Gallinari, you got DeAndre Hunter, and then you got Jeremy Grant. And, that's starting to look a lot more long and athletic all of a sudden. And so and I would definitely not leave this offseason without trying to get some value out of Mike Conley. He, again, performs fine in the regular season, but then playoffs come, he's not ready for that physicality. I would be looking for a trade where the Indiana Pacers have they made that trade mid-season. They traded away Sabonis. They got Halliburton. I think that team wants the ball in Halliburton's hands. They also have TJ McConnell as a backup point guard who actually came in and gave him really feisty minutes, and he's a really cheap backup point guard. And so I think for those reasons, they were, even though Brogdon's a really good player, I think it was 2 years ago, I was reading an article where he is like the most, what do you call it? The media just doesn't pay attention to him as he's scoring like 21 points a game, 6 rebounds, 6 assists, and he's just getting the job done. He's 6'5", like 6'10" wingspan as a point guard. And I think that's the type of point guard you want next to Donovan Mitchell. Also Brogdon, he's typically the number one defender on the Pacers over the last couple of years he's been there, where he's taken on the most challenging defensive assignment on the perimeter, on the wing. And that's what the Jazz need as well. So with 2 of those moves, we get assets and pieces for Gobert, and maybe swing some of those assets and pieces to go get a guy like Jeremy Grant. And then we have our wing defender and DeAndre Hunter out of that trade. And then we trade to get a guy like Brogdon. He's not a star. He's not an all-star, but he's solid and he shoots a great percentage. And now all of a sudden, our smallest guy on the court is a 6'2" Donovan Mitchell, who's super long, 6'10" wingspan, and it only goes up from there. And the athleticism increases from there as well. So I get those are pie in the sky ideas. I realize that. But, if I was the GM, those are the types of things I'd be looking for.
Today I'm going for pie in the sky. I don't care. I'm having fun with it. It's going to be a good we're going to talk a lot about Malcolm Brogdon today for me.
I think for me, if I was Danny Ainge, really the biggest thing is evaluating, is there really a contention between Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell? Is Rudy Gobert causing so much rift between the team that is it not worth it to have that, right? I don't know how much of it actually is true, because like it could be a ton of different things that it's happening to the team, right? Like we had a really rough patch in the month of February, and where the team just wasn't playing well. We're not shooting our lights out. We traded one of probably the most well-known, likable locker room players in Joe Ingles off the team, and maybe that caused some contention because, now we don't have that guy who just makes jokes and makes things light, So I would definitely evaluate it. I'm going to take the angle of, let's say we don't trade Rudy or Donovan. What are we going to do to try to trade out, right? Bogdanovic, he's 33, going to be 34. He's getting up there in age. He's still able to score, 15 to 24 points a game, anywhere in that range, right? He's still a scorer. So teams could still want him in that aspect. Who we could trade for. I know the Lakers have been rumored to, maybe want him on their team to give a little bit more shooting on the outside. So maybe we get Horton, who's younger, who's, proven to be a better defender than Bogdanovic on the outside. Gives us a little bit of length. Definitely the biggest thing for me, I would say, if we keep Donovan and Rudy, is we got to get rid of Conley. I was really hoping when we got Conley that he was going to be that piece that helped us get over the edge, but it just hasn't happened. Injuries has plagued him. As you've seen in this playoffs, like we talked about, length is huge during playoff time, especially defending and that kind of stuff. So I would say, I've heard that there's some rumors that it would be like Mike Conley to the Cleveland Cavaliers for Chris LeVert, who, he has had his own fair share of injuries. But he's 6'6". He's only 27 years old. He's a lot more athletic. Not the greatest defender in the world, averages in his career about 1 steal per game, but he is averaging in his career 15 points, 4 rebounds, 4 assists. That's somebody who could help Donovan Mitchell. Donovan Mitchell would take over the point guard role at that point. He would be the point guard. LeVert would be the shooting guard. And then it's a 1-2 punch of people who can drive to the basket. Now, that's just hoping that LeVert would be able to stay healthy. But it gives us that 1-2 punch. It gives us a little bit more length. It gives us the ability to drive to the basket, like you were saying earlier, Parker, like the Mavericks, where they have that. But I feel like the biggest thing maybe on that one, like that wouldn't be great, is his career average is only 32% from three. So if Quinn Snyder's offense revolves around the 3-point shot, like we've seen in the last few years, he's going to have to adjust his game style of what do we actually want to do? What's our style of play? So if we do need 3-point shooting, one guy who I've always liked, but his contract is just nasty. I don't know why. I mean, the Knicks are probably the worst organization when it comes to contracts sometimes, but I've loved Evan Fournier. Always have. I loved his style of play. He's a great shooter. He can drive. He's 6'8", lengthy. He might be somebody. He's a Frenchman, so if he came and played with Rudy, maybe he would tell Rudy to shut up in French and, get him in his spot. But definitely just somebody who, you can see that he likes to play. And he's been traded around and around. But if we could do some type of a trade to maybe get him as well, where it just gives us a little bit more length, but he can shoot the three really well, that's somebody I'd like.
I think Batum is a free agent as well.
Let's just make the French team. They play well in the Olympics and in the World Ball.
There you go. I like it. I think a lot of what you guys said is a lot of where I'm going to. I'm going Ty. In the last podcast with Justin, I talked about the reserved offseason for the Jazz, keeping the core three, in my opinion, Rudy, Donovan, Bogdanovic together, and trading Conley away. Bye-bye Conley was my motto for my plan. But I want to show, and I want us to go through. Oh, Ty, are you there? Ty,
we might have lost him.
Ty, if you can hear me, try to come back in.
We can keep going without him. Hopefully he comes back.
Yeah. See if this works. I'll bring this up while he's trying to come back. Okay, see if this will work. Okay, good. All right. There he is. Hey, Ty, can you hear us?
Yeah, sorry, guys. I don't know what happened.
We missed you.
These are my big explosions.
I bet you went over the best trade ever, and I totally missed it.
Haven't started yet. Just pulling
Still
it
coming.
up.
There we go.
Okay, I'm going to have a few of them, so we'll just go through. I'll ask you guys what you think, okay? This is the explosion trades, the extreme, go all out. Danny Ainge is having a heyday. I'm an Eagles fan. I just watched probably one of the best off seasons ever, so I'm very optimistic that great things can happen in the off season. So, trade number one, we're sticking with Donovan Mitchell as the star. We're building a team around him. We're also building a team around Quinn Snyder's game plan and around athleticism and defense. So, trade number one, this is actually a rumored trade. I'm not just making this out of whole cloth. The Golden State has been connected to Rudy Gobert for a while. Also, Wiggins is on a contract that they can't re-up in the future, so they're going to need to get rid of him eventually anyways. So this is an actual trade that I saw online. I actually added Hernan Gomez and these additional things. They only had Rudy Gobert in the trade that I saw online, which is a little far-fetched for me, but I evened it out, and here it is. Rudy Gobert, Hernan Gomez, Rudy Gay, and a second-round pick for Wiggins, Wiseman, Moses Moody, and the 2022 first-round pick. This obviously brings Wiggins in, which is huge. He's been playing like an all-star in the playoffs, and we need execution in the playoffs. We need defense and length. They also aren't using Wiseman, so they give us Wiseman. He has $8 million on his contract, so he's pretty pricey for a guy that has done nothing for them. Moses Moody is like a maybe. He's been pretty good in the playoffs, so they might not give him up anymore. But the first round pick is probably going to happen in this trade. So we get that trade done. From there, we got to make sure we get rid of Mike Conley and move on from him. We do Mike Conley, pair him with a first-round pick this year, 2027 Jazz's first-round pick to get Malcolm Brogdon. This is also an actual pick that I saw online. Actual draft trade that I saw online, suggested by, I think it was Bleacher Report. So we get Brogdon in as our point guard. And then Bogdanovic is too old for this new crew that we're making. He's a very tradable asset as well. So we're going to grab Bogdanovic, Jared Butler, and the first round pick that we got from the Warriors. And we're going to go after Miles Bridges, who's a free agent this year, and who the Hornets may not be able to hang on. This is going to probably be the hardest one to pull off out of the three. They love Miles Bridges over there. It's just going to come up to whether they can see affording him in the future, in their future plans or not. But yeah, and then in the free agency, we go in, we get a backup point guard. Tyus Jones is a free agent this year. And that leaves us with Brogdon. Starting five is Brogdon, Donovan, Wiggins, Bridges, and Wiseman. Backup Tyus Jones, Clarkson, Moody, O'Neal, and Azubuike. What do you guys think about that trade?
With I like the trade overall. I think it gives us a ton of options moving forward, especially if we could pull off the Miles Bridges one. That just creates a ton of wing depth with Wiggins and Bridges, both slashers, but honestly, Wiggins has improved his three-point shooting tremendously. And I think that's a lot of the system. Like with the Timberwolves, it was just like, yeah, you run your offense, I'll run my offense. And it was all contested shots. In the Warriors, he's getting open shots. And I think not to the level of airspace that Steph Curry creates, but Donovan creates quite a bit of airspace as well. And in the right system, we could get him open shots, and that would continue. I would also like to repurpose Wiseman personally, just because the time frame. If our goal is to keep Donovan Mitchell, I think we need to get him to obtain a player that can help us right now. Maybe you bring him in for the offseason and you see where he's at after his injuries. I'm like, oh, dang, he's that talented, and maybe he can contribute this year. But if not, and he's still like going to be a really talented project, the Pistons, they're with Cade Cunningham, they're a rebuild model where they need just young assets. And maybe it is a first round pick and Wiseman that gets us a Jeremy Grant, or trade him to the Rockets, who are restarting as well, and get a Christian Wood or something like that, who can start right, and help a playoff team right from the get-go. But I like that trade overall. I just am not sure Wiseman fits into the plan, just kind of like how you said Bogdanovic, because he's too old, doesn't fit into the plan. So
And I thought the same thing. At first, I was going to repurpose Wiseman in this scenario. And then I remembered when Wiseman was in the draft, before the draft, I did my research on him to see, and I'm like, I remembered watching his videos and like, this guy looks like he could be the next Anthony Davis. Like his block ability, his offense, his ability to handle the ball. And that's when I remembered that, I'm like, you know what? That would be very intriguing to have him with his offensive capabilities be our center with this long and small ball group that we're putting together here. So,
and to be honest, like, it would be wise, because one of the amazing things that the Warriors have done is keep that core championship group while growing a new rebuilding team. It's just crazy what they've been able to do. And honestly, if Danny Ainge has really good foresight a lot of the times, it seems like. And so I almost wonder if you obtain him and play him a bunch of minutes, and maybe Donovan Mitchell's okay to just say, hey, we got you enough pieces to be competitive this year, but we are going to get Jameis Wiseman 20 to 25 minutes a night just to show his potential. And then maybe it's this midseason or next midseason or offseason when we've put our stamp on Wiseman that he's valuable, then you can up trade him because he's got crazy potential, or if he's that good, you just keep him. But maybe you give him a full, you give him court time and let him prove himself, and then he's a better trade asset.
See, and whenever I saw this pick, I was like, man, I love that trade scenario because we get younger. We get, Wiggins, who's younger, who's a way better defender, and he's shown in this playoffs. Like, he's played really well on Luka. Luka's going to score, but he's played well. And he's helped them, and like he's had games offensively where he's helped them, and he was their leading scorer. Wiseman, like you said, he was a top pick a couple years ago, and he has abilities. It's just he hasn't really been consistent in his abilities yet as a player in the NBA. Maybe that's partly due to the fact that he's playing with, Steph Curry, who's the best player in the world, and the offense revolves around him, right? And so, that trade, I have been intrigued. Now I'm going to be the counter offer, or I'm not going to do a counter offer, but I'm going to be the devil's advocate. Why would the Warriors want to trade away Wiggins? Why would they want Rudy?
The ongoing story, even I read this like 2 weeks ago, even it's pretty fresh still, is that with Jordan Poole coming out and with the core that they have already, and Wiggins being an all-star this year, they're not going to be able to afford Wiggins. And his contract, he'll have one more year on his contract this next season. So they also have had a lot of interest in Rudy Gobert, and so that they're saying that this was a possibility. Like I said, most of these people in return that we're getting are straight from analysis, like people who have put trade scenarios together online. Like
and I will say, like, sometimes trade scenarios are great online, and they have like real source on it. Other ones you see, like LeBron James is coming to the Jazz for Jordan Clarkson.
He is?
Yeah, didn't you hear? Because Dwayne Wade's in our ownership. That's why he's coming.
Yes.
No, like for real. Like I kind of I want to look at it in both ways. We're like, yeah, I would love this trade because it gives us that wing depth that Wiggins can score. He can also play defense. He'd be on a team that's not as crowded. So maybe his scoring will go up a little bit. He's also one of those players that's a lot, when he was with the Timberwolves, he's kind of sometimes inconsistent where, few games he's not doing super hot. Some games he scores 35. And so, but he doesn't have to be that main scorer if we have Donovan Mitchell. But when I look at like the Warriors, if you lose him and you gain Gobert, yes, your defense in the post is going to be a lot better. And, like we said, Gobert doesn't play horrible outside defense. It's just when you don't have anybody to back you up, and he'll have Draymond Green. So, yes, that will improve them. But will their offense be worse because of it? Who knows, right? Like,
I have a suspicion that Steve Kerr and the Warriors coaching staff, I have a suspicion that they believe they can do better. That the way the Jazz are playing with Rudy, they're like, oh, we could do so much better. I just have a suspicion that that's why they kind of want him, because they have a plan on how to use him.
Well, and to add to your trade, Parker, I agree. I think the Warriors can use him better with their spacing and with Steph Curry's gravity and everything involved with that. And then also one of the reasons why they would see it as a benefit, they're gaining an all-time great defender in Rudy Gobert that's going to help the aging process of Klay Thompson and Steph Curry, because he protects everybody's back on the entire court every moment. Rudy Gobert, just think about it, because Klay Thompson and Steph Curry, well, Klay's a great defender. When he came back from injury, I didn't think he was going to return to that level. And watching these playoffs, he's back to his old defensive ways. It's crazy to watch, but they're way more adequate defenders, Steph and Klay, than Donovan and Conley are. Draymond is infinitely better than Bogdanovic defensively. And then they got young guys like Kuminga, who's on the up and up, that needs playing time. And they got Jordan Poole, like you said, that are all defense. And if you plug Gobert into that, every single person I named off on that Warriors team is better than the perimeter defenders on the Jazz. And you plug in Rudy Gobert to it. So I do think the Warriors would want and be interested in that. And by trading Wiggins away to the Jazz, you're opening up more time for not only Jordan Poole, but Kuminga, like I mentioned as well, which they're wanting to develop. And so I do think it's advantageous for both teams. If the Jazz need to move on and just change personnel, get more young and athletic, it makes sense for us, but it makes sense for the Warriors as well.
I know, and I like I said, I love this trade, and I do think it would actually help the Warriors because, like you were saying, Derek, you brought up those great points of, he would help out, and offensively, a lot of people don't understand what Rudy does offensively, but with Steph Curry, if he did a pick and roll, that would be deadly. And then not only that, but Rudy sets some of the best screens in the NBA, so that would open up some more of their outside shooting. So having him and Draymond Green, who Draymond Green's also one of the best screen setters in the NBA, that's two of the best screen setters getting your guys open. That would open up their offense a ton more, which as a Jazz fan, would you love that to see the Warriors just be even more scarier? Like
if we're getting younger, then yes, because it gives the Warriors their dominant time and us a future as well. Because we're gonna
So here's another question too, then Parker.
Sorry.
Because you brought up the younger part. Do we want to trade away that draft pick? Because, like, if we trade that draft pick, you have us getting Brogdon. Brogdon's 32. He's injury prone. Do we just try to go after a young point guard instead in the draft?
I think Tyus Jones kind of mitigates that too. He's younger, but also a very solid. Like he can honestly start for a team because Tyus Jones is a very solid point guard.
Brogdon feels like he's really old, but I looked him up recently. I think he's only 29, 30. He's still on the upper end. If we're building around a 25-year-old Donovan on the upper end. But at the same time, we have to survey the whole NBA, see who's available, who can help us win. Because this next 2 years is really a tryout to try to keep Donovan as well. Right. If we're if we're bottom dwellers and not barely making the play-in or maybe the 8 seed just to get whooped by a Clippers team that's going to be healthy next year and a Warriors team, I don't blame Donovan for asking out at that point,
Yeah. Nope, I agree. And so if Brogdon can stay healthy, I would love it.
Yes. Yeah. That's a big the drivability. We were talking about drives. We would have Brogdon, Donovan, Wiggins, Clarkson, Moody, Bridges even. Wiseman's can be a dominant offensive player in the paint.
Well, like you were saying earlier, I looked up the stats for Brogdon, and this last year, he only played 58 games, but in the 58 games, he scored 19 points, had 5 rebounds, and had 5 assists. Mm-hmm. That's something that Conley doesn't bring.
True.
Well, and Brogdon, I was just looking where he was at with his injury updates. He was ready to go back in February, March, ready to go. But because the Pacers were tanking at that point and wanting to give just all the learning and opportunity to Halliburton, then they didn't bring him back. But he's been healthy for the last little while. Yeah, he's been injury prone. I think he only averages 60 to 65 games a season the last little while. But so does Conley. So as long as we get him to the playoffs in a healthy, status, then that's a win compared to where we've been at. So.
Oh yeah.
All right, let's go on to the second one. This one's pretty awesome. I like this one a lot. Okay, so Rudy Gobert and 2 second-round picks for Jonathan Isaac, Markelle Fultz, Cole Anthony, and a 2027 first-round Magic pick.
Which is the first overall pick.
Well, with Rudy Gobert, maybe not, but it will be important to grab some picks in the future for us, for sure.
It's the Magic. Come on.
And then we do the same trade. Conley, first 2027 from the Jazz. For Malcolm Brogdon, we get Brogdon again. We got Markelle Fultz there. He's being repurposed. We're trading him off with Jared Butler and a second-round pick for Gary Trent Jr. And then in free agency, we go and grab T.J. Warren, who's a free agent this year. I like this for 2 reasons. I like this for the Jazz, and in a lot of ways, it's not as good as the last one, obviously, but it makes us really deep, and I like what it does for the Magic. the Magic would be insane. But let's look at this. So Brogdon, Mitchell, Gary Trent Jr., Bogdanovic, and Jonathan Isaac. I looked at Jonathan Isaac's highlights from 2020. He's amazing. Like, he was a top pick in the draft. Absolutely awesome. And I'd be really interested to have him, especially he's been in a lot of controversy lately. He's very conservative. Utah's the most conservative state in the nation. Let's bring him where he belongs, you know? Let's bring him
and to
in.
add to that, Parker, as I was going through the whole league, I was looking at Jonathan Isaac, and his injuries worry me. His talent is super intriguing. His injuries worry me, but he actually kind of gambled on himself and signed an extension contract that's very team friendly. So it starts out by paying him a lot. If he doesn't play a certain amount of games, then the second season's salary, I'm getting it wrong. I'm just kind of paraphrasing what I read. His second season's like cut in half. And if he doesn't play a certain amount of games the next season, then the next season's not even guaranteed. So if he continues to be injury prone, then the team gets more and more cap space. If he balls out, then he gets his guaranteed money. So with that talent, that's a contract willing to take a risk on.
We get longer, our defense is improved.
Yeah.
Well, our perimeter defense is improved. But also, I didn't mention the bench. Cole Anthony, he's the one thing where it's like, can we get him in the Rudy Gobert trade? Because he just broke out this year, and he's amazing. Imagine him coming up with Jordan Clarkson off the bench. The two of them could be a duo that would be super hard to contain. Mm-hmm. And that's our bench point guard units. Having the four guards of Brogdon, Mitchell, Cole Anthony, and Clarkson would just be insane.
Yeah.
But then I just want to point out the Magic as well. Magic would be sorry, not the Magic. Would it be the Magic? Yes,
yeah,
the Magic.
It'd be the Magic.
I went undercover and looked at podcasts from the Magic fans, their ideas of the offseason, what they want. And all of them are just set on this idea of length. Their coach loves length, their manager loves length. They're all talking about length. But just look at what their starting lineup would be, because they still have the number 1 pick in the draft. They would have Suggs at 6'5", Franz Wagner at 6'9", Chet Holmgren as their small forward at 7 foot. Wendell Carter Jr. W. Carter. I can't remember his name right now.
Yeah, Wendell.
Wendell Carter?
Wendell Carter Jr., yeah.
Okay. Just this stellar player at 6'10", and then Gobert to be there at the center. They would be the longest team in the league by far, I think, and pretty talented.
Mm-hmm. That'd be a defensive monster, that team right there. That'd be crazy to contend with.
So that's where, like, I like this trade, but if I was the Jazz, I would try to get, with Isaac, try to get Wendell Carter as well to the Jazz. Because from what I've seen, like, in draft boards, Jabari Smith, he's a power forward who's 6'10" and just super athletic and can score and rebound. He's kind of being that projected guy. So you put him in there at the power forward spot with Gobert. That's pretty impressive. And then they can always, they have some pretty good pieces around them in with the Magic that can get some small forward pieces to help them out. But I would love to get Wendell Carter just because his athleticism, he can play great defense. That would kind of alleviate losing Gobert. Because when I look at this, like, Isaac plays great defense, Bogdanovic doesn't. Gary Trent plays okay defense. Brogdon plays decent. Mitchell can play if he wants to, some good defense. I just worry about losing that, that number 1 defensive player of the year and probably one of the better defensive centers of all time. Where are we going to get that defense back from? But if we could get Wendell Carter and Jonathan Isaac on the team at the same time, that just helps us out down low.
So Okay, we're coming up upon an hour. Are we good with this trade at this point?
You want to move on to the next topic?
Well, yeah, just gonna start to wrap it up at least. I like both of those trades. I think I had never really thought about some of those aspects and going, I guess, that young in some aspects, but it's intriguing and I like it in a lot of ways. I do want to bring up the one trade that I brought up earlier. I forgot we would still, with that trade that I brought up with Gobert going to the Hawks for DeAndre Hunter and Clint Capella and some pick assets, we would still retain Bogdanovic in that whole trade. So if we were to swing, a trade over to the Pistons, we could go big, where obviously Capella's our starting big, and then we have Bogdanovic coming off the bench because we have guys like DeAndre Hunter and whatnot, and that side trade that I talked about where we go get Jeremy Grant. A lot of people in the Jazz community right now, I'm listening to all this local talk radio, and they're talking about how, we can't trade that Jazz 2025 pick or that 2026 pick just because, then that's the year Donovan Mitchell could leave, and we can't trade that because it's going to be really valuable. I just don't think that's the mindset we need to have. Honestly, if we trade that 2025 or 2026 first round pick, a lot of other teams know it's valuable because Donovan could technically leave. But at that point, if 2-3 years have gone by, we're still like wandering in obscurity, then yeah, we're trading Donovan, but we're going to trade him to a team and we're going to get a haul. We're going to trade him to the Knicks and demand almost like an Anthony Davis type deal where he's their hometown kid in New York. They want him desperately. We're going to ask for RJ Barrett and 3 to 4 first round picks, and they're probably going to give it up. And then we're going to be replenished with draft assets, and we're going to move on and do a rebuild. But the people that are saying the Jazz's current 2025 first round pick should be untouchable, I just don't agree with that. We got to do what we need to do to make this team competitive. Okay, guys, so we're going to end. Just because this is the podcast where we're built by sports, we have fandom that's starting from a very young age. We're going to cover every podcast something that kind of defines our fanhood, a memory that goes deep into our core that's fond every time we think of it. And Parker's got one that he's going to play for us today.
All right, today our Built by Sports legacy moment will be on Sadiata Gaines' game winner for the Utah Jazz back in 2010 versus the Cavaliers, and LeBron James. If you're a Jazz fan, you know what we're talking about. And here, let me share my screen again so we can see that. Oh, there we go.
Awesome. That one still gives me chills.
Yeah, still works, right?
It still does what it's supposed to. I just remember that Jazz season, honestly, when D. Will and Boozer were on the up and up, we had such high expectations because they rose to a formidable team so quickly. And we just thought the only way to go was up from there. But by the time we got to that 2010 season, they had kind of peaked, that point of the season. For some reason, they were just looking for some kind of energy. And Sadiata Gaines was just some guy they signed at the end of the bench. And because of, I think, some injuries, he got some playing time. Mm-hmm. And he hits that shot, the most unlikely person to ever, rise to that occasion. And they got him the ball. I think Jerry Sloan, I'm assuming, I don't know. I think Jerry Sloan got him the ball because he was the most unassuming guy to take the shot at the end of that game. He just buries it. It was beautiful. It was awesome.
Yeah, so I wasn't able to watch that live because I was on an LDS mission at that time. But I remember when I came back, and that was one of the first clips that you guys showed me as cousins, was like, hey, check this out. And just watching it, and being a Jazz fan, how can you not get chills watching something like that? Shooting the ball right in LeBron's face, having it go in. It's on TNT. The fans. I love the shot of the fans. Right?
Yeah.
Right after he makes it, it zooms out to the fans at the very top, and you just see everybody's arms up. Like, you live for those moments. As a player, as a fan, as a coach, you live for that moment where it's a game-winning shot because it just erupts, it happens, everybody loves it, and it's one of those memories that just will always last. It was a regular season game. It wasn't like for the Western Conference Finals, but it's those moments that matter, that build up a team's morale and builds up like that momentum, like Derek was talking about. That does help.
Yeah. I think there should be a movie at ESPN 30 for 30 about games. Because honestly, I think I read something about like when he was a child, he accidentally got shot. No, like he had a rough childhood. Obviously had a hard time getting into the league. He's a small man and just barely gets this chance, like this 10-day contract chance. And because of injuries, gets to play. And then to have that moment come to him and for it to go through, I think it should be named One Shot. And it would be a story about how he was shot as a child. And then he went through his adversities.
Well, it can't be ESPN. Shot. It has to be Nickelodeon since he's one of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So
okay, and that brings me to my other point I had is when we got him, I remember the fans all being like, "Who is this guy? Like, we need help." And we got this 5'11" Ninja Turtle. Like everyone was making fun of him, and I think that's what added to it too. Is like no one believed in him, and yet he saved us to win the LeBron James Cavs, and that just added to the moment too. Is this like it's just this unlikely man, unlikely story, someone we didn't expect anything from, had his biggest moment of his life right there. So that was awesome.
On a small scale in the Utah Jazz fandom, it was kind of almost like a Jeremy Lin asked in essence type thing, just because we had injuries to a lot of our core players. We needed a ball handler, 10-day contract. He came on and he shined bright for a couple games for us. And honestly, it made our expectations go through the roof. We're like, we didn't think he was going to, usurp Darren Williams or anything like that. We're like, oh, maybe we can plug him in. He'll be a key cog to our, 7 to 9 man rotation. And unfortunately it fizzled out. He didn't, stick with the Jazz or in the NBA for that, just on that topic. But anyways, it was a highlight. It was awesome. And it was just
I would say
definitely something that out of all the memories I have, out of all the Jazz memories, it's just crazy that a 10-day contract guy sticks out in one of those amazing memories,
Right. That's what I'm saying. Like, he fizzled out, didn't stay long in the league. I think he did try out some other teams, but at the end of the day, we're talking about it now. Like 12 years later, we're talking about it. We're still getting chills by it. So his legacy will live on. And I think that's all you can really ask for if you're someone that loves to play basketball, gets a chance to play in the biggest league of all time, and have that moment where you're going to be remembered. So I think that's awesome.
Well, and one thing I would want to point out as well, when you watch that highlight again, like everybody can't help but feel good for the guy. The Cavs were even smiling because they knew the situation. Like Mo Williams and others, they were just looking at this guy like as if I don't know what they were thinking, but they're like, good for him. This is crazy, and it was awesome all around.
Awesome. All right. Well, I think that's our moment.
That's our moment. Okay, guys. Well, thanks for listening in this week. We're going to try to get the ball rolling where this is a weekly deal. We're going to have other podcasts on other topics as well. So if you guys want to join in, just feel free to subscribe and tune in on a weekly basis. We'll try to get more content out there. Thanks for joining.
Definitely want to shout out Zach Killian for watching right now. We love you, Zach. We hope to have you on next time.
We see you, Zach.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Okay.